Well, I hope you guys find this class worth it. Because like I said, there's something definitely more interesting going on. Here's our disclaimer. If you need a copy of it, I can send it to you. Basically, don't stop medicine. If you're on insulin, you don't stop the insulin so that you can start taking herbs because you could die. You can go into a coma. But hopefully, after doing this, if you implement these things, you can correct your blood sugar. As a matter of fact, when I was 17, the doctor told my mom, I went through, got a bunch of tests. He says, yeah, he said, it's just a matter of time. She's going to become a diabetic just like everyone else in the family. Because all my aunts lost their legs and became blind whenever they were in their 20s. I have cousins. I mean, they're all on insulin. So I decided very young that I was going to change things. Now, I'm 59 years old, 59 and a half, and I still have normal blood sugars because I changed things. I didn't eat the regular hunky diet of noodles and stuff like that. I changed. Although there's three kinds of diabetes, type 1, type 2, and now there's type 3. We're going to heavily talk about type 2. Although type 1 and 3 is going to be helped with this somewhat, type 2 is the most common. They call it hyperinsulinism, syndrome X. These are things that are called whenever a precursor to becoming a diabetic. Insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. Most people that are fat, like I'm very fat, the people that are fat typically have blood sugar problems. The few times that I have gone to the doctor in my lifetime, they would say, oh man, we got to test your sugar. And they do all kind of stuff, and no matter how they look at it, my sugar is always normal, which kind of blows them away. And there's a lot of obesity nowadays. I think it's a lot to do with thyroid, diet, and things like that. And they start tracking the obesity trends. So the white means these people weren't even concerned about. They weren't even tracking how heavy people are. The light blue, like this, indicate that less than 10% of the population were obese. The darker blue meant that between 10 and 14% of the population was obese. And to be obese, you're 50 pounds overweight. Then they allowed for blue, 15 to 19% blue, and anything over 20% would be red. So you can see there's a few people that were about 1 out of 10, 1 out of 9 people were obese. 5 years later, now some of this has changed because people were starting to track. They didn't track before. But look at Pennsylvania. Oh, not Pennsylvania. Look at New York. It was the same. Let's see which one has changed. Okay. Right here, what is this, Indiana? I'm not very good with my map. Florida. They went up 5% in 5 years in obesity. And almost everyone was tracking it then. There's only 5 states that were not. 5 years after that, now instead of having less than 10%, probably the majority of the country had 1 out of 5 people that were obese. 5 years after that, there's only one that was 1 out of 10 people were obese. Most of them were above that. And that's in 2000. Then what they did in 2014 is they added 2 extra colors because people were going beyond what they ever anticipated. They never thought that more than 1 out of 5 people in a state would be obese. This is 1 out of 3. This is more than that. So there are 3 states that not half the people, but close to half the people are now obese. Does that shock anybody? That in, 24 years? That has, how much of a change there's been. Another thing happened a little longer than 20 years ago is the Food and Drug Administration came out and said, oh, we're going to have a food pyramid. This tells you what you eat. You should have 6 to 11 servings of breads and grains. You should have a little bit of fruit, some vegetables, milk products, you should have quite a bit, a little bit of meat, and your oil very sparingly, very, very sparingly. This pyramid was never tested. They didn't do clinical trials and stuff like that to find that out. I once went to a place called Veggie Fest, which is something that is in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and they have a whole week that you go there and you learn how to be a vegetarian, and they talk about health and nutrition and stuff like that. And in there, they had a picture of the food pyramid, and then they had a picture of people who donate to developing this food pyramid. Monsanto's, with the grains, was the #1 contributor, and so on. It mirrored this exactly. So right now, about 15% of our diet, if you do the food pyramid, should be protein, 25% should be fat, and 60% should be simple carbohydrates, or carbohydrates in general, most of them, because they said 6 to 11 servings compared to the other. Most of it should be pastas and breads and stuff like that. So this was never studied. However, they did study hogs. Oops, wait a minute, sorry. So the carbs were very popular then. They were telling you low fat, fat-free, but it was never tested in the population. However, they did test hogs. They found out that if you have hogs and cattle and you want them to get fat really, really quickly, the best diet would be about 10% protein, 29% fat, and 61% carbohydrates. The carbohydrates and grains are the easiest way to get hogs and cattle ready to butcher quickly because you put a lot of weight on them. Well, look at that compared to the current pyramid. The sad thing is a lot of people are trying to listen to the information that's out there that's being given by the Food and Drug Administration, and they're falling short, terribly so. Other thing for the FDA, and I'm not just bashing FDA, but this is just something that you need to realize, they don't work as much with health. You think they should, but they really don't know that much about health. For instance, they say that the RDA, recommend daily allowance, of vitamin C is 80 milligrams. I researched on the web for hours and hours. I could not find one bottle, one pill that you can get of vitamin C that's under 80 milligrams or around 80 milligrams. I think the smallest I found was 500 to 1,000. So if you follow by what is being taught by mainstream, that's not going to get you where you need to go.